what we need to be focusing on, yes, AI search is kind of a key part of this, but is meeting users where they are and on the platforms that they are searching. And yes, Google is still the biggest one, but there are others that we now need to consider, including AI. SEOs who adapt now are essentially going to have a kind of very significant first mover advantage. Whereas if you leave it too late, then you're not going to be able to drive the same results as your competitors. Hi, I'm Annabelle Sacher, and this is SEO in 2026.
Annabelle, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
So, as we move into 2026, it's clear that AI search strategy needs to become a core focus for us as SEOs. We know that the search landscape is evolving really, really fast. And while currently AI only makes up quite a small percentage of the search landscape, it's growing, and it's growing quickly. And I think one of the biggest unlocks or the most powerful levers in this new era is currently and is definitely going to be digital PR. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a little biased, as you know. What I am seeing is that while general industry consensus suggests that platforms like YouTube, Reddit, and Wikipedia are kind of the most heavily cited by AI systems, and it's not untrue. What I am seeing and kind of what my peers are noticing increasingly across the industry is that features in high quality, topic relevant, authoritative publications are having a significant impact on AI driven search visibility. And I'm noticing kind of a really, really clear trend through my work with clients. So AI systems are prioritizing those credible and relevant media placements, and those are surfacing more and more frequently in AI generated responses. So this is kind of a really big opportunity for brands to tackle this new world of AI search. And I think if you want to future-proof your SEO strategy, it's key that you invest in digital PR that earns mentions and backlinks from trusted voices in your niche. It's not only going to build kind of more broad brand authority, but position your content, your brand, your products to be surfaced by AI, which eventually might very well become the dominant mode of search.
You never know. Watch the space. So you mentioned digital PR there. Is that a key element in how brands should develop AI search strategies in 2026?
Absolutely. So what I'm seeing more and more is while some of the sources we might expect are being pulled through as kind of citations by AI, so things like Reddit or Quora or YouTube, high value publications are more and more being used as citation sources for AI search results. Essentially, if your business relies on being seen as a go-to source within your space, which I think pretty much every business does, this strategy is going to be essential. Digital PR is going to be essential to visibility in AI search.
Okay, and I guess one of the key elements to digital PR is knowing where the consumer is to begin with and reaching them at the right point. So how do you know where the consumer demand is in 2026?
So, I mean, there are a number of different tactics and kind of techniques that you can use to gain an understanding of that. Obviously, when you're building out a strategy for a client, you need to start with their personas and kind of any proprietary data that they have on their client. But then there are other tools that you can use, and tools that I use in my day-to-day job, and I'm lucky enough to have access to in the agency I work for. So search data is obviously kind of a really key indicator of consumer demand, as is social search data. Most of us kind of look at that on maybe a monthly basis, but we at MediaVision are lucky enough to be able to see that on a weekly basis because of the proprietary technology that we've built. So I guess where we get our understanding of our audience is that search data. I think also, I mean, logically, and I think most SEOs would agree with this, if you are trying to target people on search channels, you need to understand what they're searching in order to understand them. So I think beginning with search data is kind of the key point for understanding your consumer.
Okay, and beginning with search data, is that the way that successful digital PR tends to be done at the moment?
I mean, in my experience, yes. I think digital PR can go down a couple of different routes. But I do think the most effective digital PR that ultimately is going to drive your SEO goals, which is a big part of what digital PR is, right? Digital PR aims to drive both kind of brand and non-brand search. The only way that you're going to effectively do that is if you begin with the search data, right? So unless you understand what it is that consumers are searching, you cannot build, and how, therefore, to target that, you cannot build an effective digital PR strategy.
It's an intriguing subject because it's quite a creative subject, but I guess increasingly it's becoming more data driven. Where would you say the crossover is between SEO and digital PR? What does an SEO need to know about digital PR, and at what stage is it becoming too creative or too different to what an SEO should be doing?
Yeah, I think it's a constant debate, right? I worked in a number of different agencies and in-house as well, and there always seems to be this kind of misunderstanding, I think, on both sides between digital PR and SEO. SEO teams sometimes feel digital PR can be a bit too sort of, I guess, head in the clouds and creative, and digital PR think that SEO don't really understand the value of what they do. But actually, the two teams kind of need to be as integrated as possible. The reason that clients buy digital PR is to drive visibility, both in terms of their brand, but also in terms of kind of non-brand, so products and categories, right? If digital PR doesn't align with SEO data, then it's not going to achieve a client's goals at the end of the day. So I think it needs to be kind of a real balance. Obviously, being creative is what gets your story featured in media. That's what gets you links and mentions of a high quality. But that creativity needs to be in line with the goal that you are driving. So the key product, for example, that you are targeting, or category that you are targeting, your creative idea, your creative campaign needs to be aligned to that. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And it's not a fixed line, obviously, between digital PR and SEO, and it depends on how the SEO is, what their mindset is, what their abilities are, what their interests are as well, I guess. But also, in relation to what you were saying, I'm wondering about the difference between digital PR and more conventional search engines like Google's traditional search engine and perhaps AI-driven search engines. Are there any types of digital PR campaigns that you've seen to be quite successful in AI search engines?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say that there are a couple of different types. The main one, I would say the most effective, is probably best of lists. So that tends to come from a reactive PR approach or a kind of proactive PR approach in terms of things like gifting. Essentially, a best of list is a breakdown of the top product or the top brands within a certain category. So a good example of this for a client that we had recently was a list in Who, What, Where of, I think it was the best summer work dresses. And I know the heat wave seems like a bit of a mile away, but we did have one recently, and we kind of got quite a lot of press over dresses that some of our clients had that were both appropriate for work and very cool and breezy to wear. Now, what we noticed was that those lists of kind of best of type dresses actually drove visibility for two of our clients across AI platforms. So the citation that I think it was on ChatGPT and also Perplexity that was being pulled in was that Who, What, Where list of kind of best of summer work dresses. So if you searched summer work dresses in either of those platforms, our client was being pulled in. And the reason that they were being pulled in, and we could see this kind of using, I think we used ChatGPT Path, but also we're using kind of a variety of other tools, including Ahrefs and Wake. But the reason essentially was that article, that best of article. And more, what we're seeing for our clients and their competitors is those best of lists are the best kind of tactic currently to get featured in AI search results. But I would say also kind of some like product reviews and product features we've seen pulling through too in order to drive those search results. So it's important not to exclude those. And it's interesting actually to go back to your point about the balance between, or your question about the balance between creativity and data when it comes to digital PR and SEO. I would say that when it comes to AI search at the moment and driving visibility there, utilizing digital PR, actually, I would recommend that digital PRs lean more towards the data than the creative, because you really, really need to understand what it is your consumers are searching for and when, in order to drive the right PR, which is essentially product and best of led. So not super creative, but more product and data around product led, that is ultimately going to drive visibility in AI search results.
Okay, you mentioned that phrase driving visibility a few times in AI search results. And one thing that you also talk about is driving visibility on AI cited domains. And I also noted that in your previous answer, you talked about publishing on a platform. So that could mean many different things. It could mean social media, it could mean, I guess, an app, but also could mean your domain or someone else's domain out there. How do you determine the best place to publish in order to give you the best opportunity to be picked up by an AI search result?
Yeah. So I think ultimately what you need to focus on is high quality publishers. So it's a similar metric when I talk to, and when I talk about AI cited domains, what I'm talking about is what we would normally refer to kind of from an SEO perspective as high quality referring domains, which ultimately translates to high quality publishers in my industry. So online publishers. The way that you would determine which publishers are kind of best for your client or best for kind of what you're trying to achieve for that client, I think is twofold. So the first thing is relevance. Are they relevant to the topic or that your client wants to surface for? Are they relevant for the products that your client sells? Are they relevant for their brand? So, I mean, I work a lot with fashion clients, so I think it's relatively clear what publishers might be relevant for them. But whatever industry it is that your client is in, you need to make sure that the relevance of the publications you are going after with your digital PR really, really aligns with their brand and their products. And then, of course, digital PR metrics. So the authority of those publishers. What is their domain rating? So ideally, we tend to go for we tend to get way above this, but what we tell clients is sort of between 50 plus, so between 50 and 100. Where we tend to land is kind of an average DR of, I would say, like 75 to 80, sometimes more. But that's kind of the quality of publisher that you should be going after, or the quality of AI cited domain in this case that you should be going after.
Okay, great. It's always wonderful to have a hard metric to refer to. And an SEO will tend to always want to make their own domain name as authoritative as possible. So should you try to make your own domain AI cited, or is that really tricky? Is it worthwhile just focusing your efforts on other domains that are already AI cited?
I don't think it's not worthwhile, but I do think it's going to be in the same way that generally the most high authority domains online are publishers, and it's difficult to compete with those, or many of them are publishers and it's difficult to compete with those. That difficulty when it comes to competition is still going to be there. And I think the kind of golden thread, or the wonderful trick with digital PR, is that you can both influence your own domain rating and kind of your visibility more broadly. So you are not necessarily competing with publishers, but you're drawing on their authority in order to influence your own. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But, and also in relation to that, I'm wondering if the strategy should be about your message appearing within the AI search engine and people consuming your content directly on there, or attempting to drive people back to your own site.
I mean, from what I can tell in terms of the user journey on AI at the moment, but again, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about this in terms of measuring the effectiveness of AI, or the effectiveness of kind of SEO tactics to drive visibility in AI. But what I would say is that everything is kind of in its infancy. However, what I can see at the moment in terms of that user journey is that consumers tend to go from AI to either the publication or the domain cited by AI, or back to Google. And so at the moment, there isn't really the function necessarily, unless you can compete with those kind of top tier publishers to drive users directly to your site. That might evolve in the future, but I think what's more likely to evolve is a kind of shopping function on AI. So similar to Google Shopping for your products. So at the moment, I would say that I don't know that it's possible for the main goal to be to drive people to your site, because I don't necessarily think that brands are going to be able to compete quite yet with the other domains cited by AI.
Annabelle, what's the key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
So my key takeaway is ultimately what we need to be focusing on. Yes, AI search is kind of a key part of this, but is meeting users where they are and on the platforms that they are searching. And yes, Google is still the biggest one, but there are others that we now need to consider, including AI. SEOs who adapt now are essentially going to have a kind of very significant first mover advantage. Whereas if you leave it too late, then you're not going to be able to drive the same results as your competitors.
Annabelle Sacher is head of digital PR at MediaVision. Find out more at wearemediavision.com. Annabelle, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Thank you so much for having me.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at seoin2026.com.